All right, let's dive into the food you eat every single day. But we're not going to talk about taste or how pretty it looks. Nope. We're going on an investigation to find the hidden dangers, the threats you can't see, smell, or even taste.
So think about it. How do you really know if your food is safe? I mean, this apple looks perfect, right? This chicken smells incredible. But here's the thing. Our senses can totally fool us. The real question isn't, does it look good? It's, is it safe? And, well, the answer isn't always so obvious.
And this gets to a super important point. There's a huge difference between food quality and food safety. Quality is all about what we like. The great taste, the vibrant color, the perfect texture. But safety, that's about what's happening on a level we can't even see. A burger that looks absolutely perfect can still be hiding something nasty, and that's exactly what we're focused on today.
Okay, so let's start with our first category of these unseen threats. I like to call them the living dangers. These are tiny, microscopic organisms that can turn a fantastic meal into a really, really big problem.
The official term for these is biological hazards. We're talking about living things, bacteria, viruses, and parasites. You can't see them, you can't smell them, but they are, without a doubt, the #1 cause of foodborne illness.
And this right here gives you a rare peek into that invisible world. What you're looking at are colonies of bacteria, stuff like Salmonella or E. coli, growing in a lab. Now, a single bacterium on its own is pretty harmless, but when they multiply into huge colonies like this on our food, that's when they become a serious risk to our health.
And you find them in some pretty common places. We've all heard of Salmonella in raw chicken or E. coli in undercooked beef. But it's not just meat, Viruses like Hepatitis A have been found in things like strawberries, and parasites like Cyclospora have shown up on fresh raspberries.
Okay, so we've covered the living threats. Now let's switch gears to threat number 2, the non-living substances that just plain don't belong in our food. We're talking about chemical contaminants.
So a chemical hazard is basically any toxic substance. And the tricky part is, it can get into our food in a few different ways. Sometimes it's just there naturally, sometimes it's added on purpose, and sometimes it gets in there by complete accident. And these accidental contaminations are a huge, huge risk. Just picture a busy restaurant kitchen or a big food processing plant. You've got all these common cleaning supplies around. If they're not stored or used exactly right, it's actually pretty easy for them to end up in the food.
Let's break that down a bit more. You've got things like nitrates, which are often added to meats to preserve them. That's intentional. But then you have pesticides from animal feed or growth hormones used in livestock that can wind up in the final product. And of course, like we just saw, cleaners and sanitizers are a huge source of unintentional contamination.
All right, on to our third and final threat. This is probably the one that's easiest to imagine and, honestly, maybe the most unsettling. We're talking about physical objects that end up where they absolutely should not be.
The official name is a physical hazard, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Any foreign object that if you swallowed it could cause a direct injury. We're talking chipping a tooth, choking, or even worse.
So where do these things even come from? Well, sometimes they're just part of the food itself, like a tiny bone fragment in ground meat. Other times, they get in during processing. Think a loose screw from a machine or a little stone that got mixed in with vegetables. And yep, sometimes the source is human. A lost piece of jewelry, a bit of a plastic glove, or even a fingernail.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. We've just laid out the 3 big threats, and it all sounds a little scary. But here is the really good news. Every single one of these hazards can be controlled. So now, let's pivot from the problems to the solutions.
When it comes to those biological hazards, our single greatest weapon is temperature. It's really a 3-step attack. First, you cook the food hot enough to kill the microbes. Simple. Second, you hold it cold enough, we're talking below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, to stop them from growing in the first place. And third, with leftovers, you have to cool them down fast to get them out of that temperature danger zone, where microbes just love to multiply.
Now, the most important part is knowing the right temperature. So for something like chicken or turkey, which can carry salmonella, there's one critical number you have to hit. And that number is
165 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, salmonella just can't survive. It's the kill shot. It's what makes absolutely sure your poultry is safe to eat.
Okay, so what about ground beef? E. coli can be a real concern there. And because the grinding process can actually mix bacteria from the surface all the way through the meat, there's a different magic number you need to remember. 155 degrees Fahrenheit. You hit that internal temperature, and you can be confident that any potential E. coli has been totally wiped out.
So how do we control chemical hazards? Well, it takes a really strict system. It's all about using only approved chemicals at very precise, safe levels, making sure everything is rinsed properly, and even getting guarantees from suppliers. Proper labeling and storage are absolutely non-negotiable. It's a whole system of checks and balances.
And what about those physical hazards? That takes a mix of technology and people. Food processors use things like filters, sieves, and even powerful metal detectors right on the production line. But that's combined with really strict rules for employees, like a no jewelry policy, and strong quality control programs designed to catch anything that might slip through.
So, there you have it. We've pulled back the curtain on the invisible threats, from bacteria to bits of metal, and the complex systems designed to stop them. But the chain of food safety doesn't end in a factory. It ends with you, in your kitchen. Knowing about these hazards is only half the battle. So the real question is, now that you can see the unseen, what role will you play in the other half?